On this episode, we have an air check session with Nina Blackwood of MTV, Absolutely 80s, and Sirius-XM's 80s on 8.
Nina tells us about the launch of MTV, Live Aid, her encounters with John Mellencamp, Frank Zappa, and more.
Here we go.
Welcome to Air Check, the podcast with some of the best radio stories, interviews, and promotion tales from some of the best in the biz, as hosted by two of the, well, let's just say they're in the biz. From Philadelphia, Rich DeSisto and Paul Kelly.
Hey, thanks for joining us. I'm Rich DeSisto.
And I'm Paul Kelly.
On this air check session, we're thrilled to have the radio hostess of the nationally syndicated radio show, Absolutely 80s.
Nina Blackwood's Absolutely 80s.
If you've got a box hiding in your garage filled with what we're quaintly referred to as cassettes, you're in the right place.
You can also hear her on Sirius-XM's 80s on 8, and she's also one of the 5 original VJs from MTV.
Music Television, MTV. We've got your favorite video music in stereo. I'm Nina Blackwood, filling in for Martha Quinn. This hour, The Kinks, Dexy's Midnight Runners, Culture Club, plus new video disc releases in the music news.
How about it for Nina Blackwood?
I'm just honored.
Thank you so much for being with us today.
Oh, thank you for having me.
We have so much to talk about, but for starters, I love asking fellow animal lovers about their pets. Paul is a proud parent of Beagle Bailey, and I, as they say, am part of the staff of 4 cats.
That is my primary love, actually, my animals. I've got 5 cats, only 1 dog because he doesn't get along with other dogs. Usually I have at least 2. And I've got 2 parrots as well. And I live, among nature. And it's exactly why I moved to where I moved. So I've got a lot of outdoor critters. My little red squirrels keep me occupied every day. I don't think there's a day that goes by that they don't make me laugh out loud. I don't know if you're familiar with the little red squirrels.
Oh, yeah. The red squirrels are very vocal.
They're little ninjas.
Yes.
And they're just hysterical. They remind me, I'm half Italian, so I can say this, but they remind me of a little Italian family because they're eating and yelling at each other at the same time. It's like, that reminds me of my family. So yes, animals are actually animals in nature, the environment, my number 1 love. Of course, I love music and always have, but I just have always been very close to animals in nature.
Nina, 1981, you saw the article in Billboard magazine. This new channel, Music Television, MTV, was starting up. They're looking for hosts and hostesses. You became one of the original 5 VJs as the project launched studios in New York. And on August 1st, 1981 at midnight, you and the crew got on a bus and went to Fort Lee, New Jersey to watch the launch. Can you tell us about that?
It was probably one of the most memorable days of my life, and I think I could speak for my cohorts as well. What it's hard for people to imagine these days is that cable was also in its infancy, so it wasn't even in the big cities. And like you said, we all were in New York. It wasn't that the channel wasn't in New York. Cable wasn't in New York. There was no cable. So the only place we could get it is, to jump in, they had chartered some buses and took us to this, funky bar in New Jersey. And the excitement in that room and the anticipation was like nothing I've ever experienced prior or after.
T-minus 27 seconds.
And when that the beginning, the and that rocket went off. There were tears, there were yells. It was like a baby being born. For all these people, many of whom had worked on MTV for months and months and months. And finally, everything was coming to this fruition. And once that rocket went off, that was it, 24/7. The train was rolling.
Ladies and gentlemen, rock and roll.
It was just amazing. Just electrifying, really.
Hi, I'm Nina Blackwood, and I'll be with you after JJ right here on MTV, the world's first video music channel.
In the book VJ, you guys, you, Mark, Alan, Martha, and JJ, cover many things. But when it comes to doing the job of what we look back on as the narrators of a generation, you took it serious. You say in the book that doing the research you needed to do, the show prep that was needed to sit face-to-face with music icons, is what you loved. You loved to be the interviewer. And I'm not surprised that you have said that the Mick Jagger and David Bowies of the world were much easier to interview than those up-and-coming artists at the time, like the Stray Cats or Bow Wow Wow. That said, you also did Duran Duran's first ever MTV interview. And as American Fool got released, John Cougar came in for a studio interview. Tell us about that.
Yeah, John Cougar, now Mellencamp.
Yeah.
Well, he was quite something, and he still is. You know, he calls himself the low bastard. And he came in, we had this craft service table set up with, we'd call it the bagel table. And I was standing there getting some coffee, and he comes in, and, he's not a real tall guy. He's maybe, I don't know, I'd say 5'7", and he just swept me up off my feet. In fact, I don't know if that photo's in the book or not.
It is.
It might be. Yeah, okay. The crew hated him, I gotta say. The men did not like him. They thought he was this brash, big mouth, know-it-all. But there was something about John that, I liked as an artist.
What's a favorite song that you've ever written? What's your particular choice?
I haven't written that song yet. I'm still waiting for me to write my favorite song. I've got a lot of favorite songs that I get excited about when I hear by other people. Hey, I'm a fan. I've always been a record fan, even though I feel like rock and roll is kind of a dinosaur these days.
So in a way, in your own way, you're a bit of an outlaw. You don't intentionally go out to do that just because you sort of go around.
I don't. I know I play the game. Don't ever think I don't play the game, because we all play the game. We all got bosses. And the minute you start thinking you're free is when you're in trouble, because then you're living a lie.
I am so proud of what he has done on so many levels. He's also, as you know, a very fine visual artist. Far made everything. I could go on and on and on. And he really has done things his own way, which, some people thought that, he was difficult to work with because of that. But he always had his credibility intact, with the exception of, when he took his manager's advice, went by the stupid name John Cougar. He hated it. As soon as he could, he changed it back. So that was kind of part and parcel of the artist as an individual.
I came to New York for the first time when I got out of college, and I got hooked up with a guy who said, listen, man, I took David Jones to David Bowie, and I changed his name, and it was because that was one of the reasons he's so successful. So I'm going to do the same for you. Because I went and looked at the album cover, and there was like this name on the album cover, my picture, and I was like, who's this fool? That ain't my name. I want my. He says, I can't sell a guy named John Mellencamp. I could sell John Cougar. And I said, well, forget it then. I'm not interested. He said, great, go back and pour concrete, which is what you were doing.
Cougar did not go back to pouring concrete. Instead, he returned to Indiana to begin work on new material. Within months, he had a contract with Rod Stewart's label, Riva Records. It wasn't long before an album simply entitled John Cougar was finding its way on the charts and on the airwaves.
I could go on and on and on about his talents, but just suffice to say that I'm just really proud of his accomplishments. And I wish he'd get back with Meg Ryan.
Yeah.
I thought they were so perfect. I don't usually care about couples, but for some reason, they just seem so perfect, but I guess they're not, so...
MTV, Nina, had a great promotion team. I mean, the frequency ideas, the writing, the payoffs, the amount and the level of prizes. They were bigger than what any radio station could ever do competitively. To talk about some of the promotions, I mean, did you have a favorite that was done with the channel?
Well, I think, speaking of, we were just talking about him, one of our most successful ones was with John Mellencamp when we gave away a house. And who could forget him, the commercials. We're going to paint the mother pink.
The MTV Party House. You win it. You own it. Like it or not. It's smack in the middle of the heartland. Bloomington, Indiana, hometown of John Cougar Mellencamp.
I give you the deeds and the keys, and then we paint the mother pink.
That was probably, I don't have the statistics, but from all I know, I think that was the most popular contest that we had.
Air check. Radio industry stories that didn't always make it on the air, but are worth telling here. You know you want to share all the details. Email aircheckme@gmail.com to join Rich DeSisto and Paul Kelly on Aircheck.
America, demand your MTV.
America, demand your MTV! I want my MTV!
I want my MTV.
I want my MTV.
I want my MTV.
Call your cable company and say, I want my MTV!
Too much is never enough.
Hi, I'm Nina Blackwood, and you're listening to Aircheck. Enjoy.
Talk about the MTV process, the nuts and bolts of it all, like the behind-the-scenes stuff. Were you guys actually sitting there like DJs playing the music videos and watching them in real time and then coming on and doing the back sell and all the other business of the network?
No, it was not done in real time.
Yeah.
It was done live to tape for our segments. So I guess you could compare it to like voice tracking with radio. But we very rarely, we would call it burning back. It would have to be like some really major, mistake or, somebody accidentally swearing for us to redo it. But how basic things were back in 1981, we would do our segments, recording to tape, and then the videotape would actually have to be hand delivered. There'd be a delivery guy out there with a truck, and he'd have to drive them out to the end of Long Island in Smithtown for Smithtown to go send it up to the satellite. Do you believe that? Talk about basic.
So there was a lot of planning then behind just a normal break that you would be on camera talking about that video that was just played, and then any other kind of station business, whether it was promoting one of those one-night stand contests or an interview or any kind of rock news. There was a lot of storyboarding, if I could use that term.
Yes, absolutely. And we would all get our logs, the music logs, the night before and prep what we were going to say, and especially Martha and I were big on research. So you'd always find Martha and I, when we finally moved to a studio, that there was an actual like VJ lounge / library or file area. So you would generally find Martha and I with our nose in magazines and watching the videos, whereas JJ, who was the veteran, very well-known disc jockey, he was club man because he really loved going out to clubs in New York. He just loved it. But he would come in basically almost always not late, but cutting it really close to when he was supposed to be in there. And he'd just, dab on some makeup and just go out there right under the set and do his show. So, we all approached it in a different manner. But as you mentioned before, that's one of the reasons I like to interview people, because I really love research. And to this day, for my Sirius-XM shows, my prep time is way more than, the actual show, because I love to do it. I like to go in depth.
A lot of people, Nina, may not know that you are a harp player, a harpist, and that you played at the wedding of Styx guitarist Tommy Shaw. What can you tell us about that experience?
Tommy and his then soon-to-be wife and I were friends. I had done something out at his farm. He lived in Niles, Michigan, so I did, an on-site thing with him. So we became friends. When he was going to get married, he thought, how cool to have me play harp. So that's what happened. But I remember, because there were a lot of musicians at that wedding sitting in the church, and I do remember being a little more nervous than I normally would be playing harp, because I'm thinking, God, I'm playing to all these musicians, But it was great.
You didn't know it, but you and Paul were at the same place at the same time, along with thousands of other people, 35 years ago this summer. Live Aid.
July 13th, 7 a.m. One concert, over 60 artists, including Bob Dylan, Mick Jagger, Tina Turner, Tom Petty, and Madonna in the U.S., and U2, David Bowie, Elvis Costello, and The Who in the U.K., banding together to halt the African famine crisis. Only one channel has all 17 hours of Live Aid, MTV Music Television. Join us.
That was, again, a once-in-a-lifetime experience.
This is it! 16 hours of the biggest rock and roll concert of all time. It's 6:57 a.m. here in JFK Stadium in Philadelphia, and we are all super early to watch history in the making.
I'm Mark Goodman with Martha Quinn. We'll be here with Alan Hunter and Nina Blackwood. Now, Al is out in the stadium, and Nina is backstage right now. J.J. Jackson's at Wembley Stadium in London, and we're glad that you're with us. Nina.
Good morning. From now until the last roadie clears out of here, MTV will broadcast live. More than 60 of rock and roll's greatest artists will play on stages all around the world. They've dropped what they're doing, they've packed their bags, and they've flown in specially to donate their talent. Supergroups have reunited, all-star jam sessions have been scheduled, and Alan Hunter is out on the field with the crowd.
We worked very hard on our presentation, and to see all these different people there performing for very serious, important cause, not only in Philadelphia but in London, quite something. A very moving experience.
The Live Aid telecast kicked off right on schedule when Status Quo took to the stage at London's Wembley Stadium at 7 a.m. Eastern Time. For event organizer Bob Geldof, the concert was the realization of a dream.
In my mind, I've just been focusing on getting there to this day, working it all out and making sure it worked. And then suddenly I forgot it all for those minutes I was on stage. And it all seemed very real to me, and it suddenly struck me, just how exciting it must seem to other people. And it suddenly struck me, and I just said, I think this is the happiest day of my life.
For music fans around the world, there was a non-stop broadcast of music history in the making. Highlights included duets by Paul Young and Alison Moyet, Elton John and George Michael, and Sting and Phil Collins in London, with Phil later joining Eric Clapton on stage in Philadelphia, plus the global debut of Mick Jagger and David Bowie's video Dancing in the Streets. It was also a day of reunions for Black Sabbath, The Who, Jimmy Page, and Robert Plant. While the music continued, so did the fundraising. It was an exciting and emotional day for everyone, and one that will hopefully leave a lasting impression long after the music stops.
Returning with more from Aircheck. The time's yours. Take the mic. Tell us about your best days in radio or your worst. It's your call. Email aircheckme@gmail.com to join Rich DeSisto and Paul Kelly on Aircheck.
Rich DeSisto and I are both doing radio here in Philly, Nina. And we've both done studio and phone interviews. Some good, some not so good. You describe an interview you did with Frank Zappa as your quote-unquote worst moment. What happened?
Oh, that's funny. I was just in the email this morning with Mark Goodman about that. It was just the wrong pairing. They probably should have had Mark or JJ with Frank, but that was my first, it was the channel's first live event. And Frank, quite sardonic and cynical with a huge ego. Just even in sound check, he just was really rude to me.
So what else is new, Nina?
Gosh, not that much. I'd rather hear what you have to tell, actually.
This is the first live simulcast in the history of cable broadcasting.
Ah, yes, that's right. It is. It actually is. It's the very first simulcast in cable broadcasting, which is very special. It's very exciting, though, actually. I'm very
much looking forward. This is like one of those crummy award shows. People stand around and say how exciting. It's not exciting at all.
I don't have an award for you, though. I can't think of anything.
The type of things that people say when they're waiting and going, it's very exciting. Of course it's exciting. It's the big one.
No, wait a minute.
What?
Don't get obnoxious
I'm
with
not
me.
obnoxious.
Look, I gave you
Jump
some
up
time
and down
here.
like
Hey,
you're
wait a minute.
Jump.
Look, okay, you are what you is.
That's right.
You've got a lot of nice people waiting out there for you. They're so excited. Listen to that.
I know.
Listen to that. And there it goes.
I wasn't, experienced enough to, give it back to him. So it just was not a good experience, and it was like the bully picking on, the shy kid in the playground. So it was not a pleasant experience. He must have thought, he obviously thought it was just so fun, but I thought it was not very cool. Luckily, I didn't have anything that came close to that afterwards. I learned by, iron in the fire,
Well, hey, you guys were new. Everything was new. Uncharted territory, as they say. You guys were making the rules as you went along. Whether it was an interview with Frank Zappa or a live broadcast or playing the right video. But, you know, I think once MTV started to address things like social issues, you guys kind of found your way. At one time, though, when it came to the playlist, there was a valid argument that MTV did not spotlight black artists enough.
Black musicians are complaining that they are being left out of the video market, specifically the music, television, cable operation.
I mean, there are a lot of white kids that put on MTV and say, yeah, where's Stevie Wonder? Where's Marvin Gaye? Where's Rick James? You know, where are all these acts? Next to my Billy Joel record is Rick James, and next to my Van Halen record, there's Earth, Wind and Fire, and next to my AC/DC record, there's maybe Aretha Franklin, Diana Ross or something. Where are these people? I mean, don't we exist?
Even some of their white contemporaries came to their defense, like David Bowie.
I'd like to ask you something. All right. It occurred to me, having watched MTV over the last few months, that it's a solid enterprise and it's got a lot going for it. I'm just floored by the fact that there's so few black artists featured on it. Why is that?
You know, I don't think it was until Michael Jackson's Billie Jean video before MTV kind of made this shift to be more socially conscious and more socially involved. And I remember MTV's Safe Sex Initiative, their response to the AIDS epidemic. It was edgy, it was controversial, and it came before President Ronald Reagan even mentioned the word AIDS in public. Now that was big.
With me right now is half of the most heavily nominated band of the evening, REM. Thanks for being here, guys.
Thanks, Kurt.
Do you know what the story is on these ribbons? I know they've been circulating. They were seen at the Emmy Awards show, but I think they're trying to get everyone in the country to wear them for AIDS Day on December 1st, right?
Yeah, I think there's just hundreds of thousands of people who feel like the government in the U.S. hasn't really paid enough attention to the AIDS crisis and to people with AIDS, and a lot of people in the entertainment industry are wearing these red ribbons right now, trying to ask other people to do the same thing to show compassion for the AIDS crisis and people with AIDS.
Yeah. Do you have a lot of friends that have been affected by this yourself?
Yeah, I think everyone does at this point.
Everyone I know knows at least someone who's been directly affected by it, yeah.
So with all that kind of getting sewed into the fabric of MTV, when you left in '86, did you kind of feel as though you did good, that you made a difference?
No, to be quite honest, I didn't look at it that way until many, many years later, and it would be brought up. You know, at the time, it was doing my job, doing it the best that I could, and I loved my job. So I didn't think of, I don't know about the other VJs, but personally, I didn't think of it that way. I really didn't.
MTV, I mean, it seems to be part of who you are still, and I mean, why not? I mean, you created a really nice brand for yourself. You're currently hosting a syndicated 80s show, heard nationally or worldwide on radio stations everywhere, absolutely 80s. You're involved with the 80s cruises. Unfortunately, COVID-19 did what it did to that this year, halted it. Who was scheduled to be on this year's cruise?
We did it this past year. We were the last ship to be allowed back in Miami. So we had already left when the big brunt came down. So that was, I was really glad to be home.
Who was on it?
Kool and the Gang. We had a couple of people, unfortunately, that could not make it on because of that. Bret Michaels was scheduled. However, he's a diabetic, and at the very last minute, his doctors had warned him not to do the cruise. So unfortunately, he did not make it.
I'm thinking back when you were a teenager. You were living in an era when FM radio was on top of the world, right? Pre-music video. But Paul and I, as radio guys, would argue that FM radio was always on top of the world, pre, during, and after music video. But now you fast forward to this crowded digital era that we all find ourselves in. And I'm curious, where are you getting your music? What are you listening to? Where are you listening? Do you own a personal speaker, or is the AM/FM radio still your go-to?
I listen online. Basically, because I'm on my computer a lot. That's how I listen to most things. I think most people do. But I'm very low tech. I don't like all the gizmos. I don't have a smartphone. None of that kind of stuff. I'm not into that really. Or watch the videos basically because they're there. I do have to say my favorite lockdown band is Sammy Hagar and the Circle. I've really enjoyed. They're doing all these covers virtually with the members in different places in their homes. And I tell you, that band rocks. So if you haven't checked those out, do so. And then I do stupid things. because I'm so frustrated with the way the country has gone. We won't get into that, but well, I don't know. Now I'm embarrassed. I brought something up that now I have to say, but I've been, in fact, I was just doing it this morning, practicing, I use the term lightly, drums, getting frustrations out to various artists. Like today, I thought I was working on the countdown, and we had Bang a Gong, a power station, and so I'm watching the video, just for enjoyment, basically while I'm doing the countdown. I was playing along to Tony Thompson, and I thought, if I were a drummer, that's who I'd want to play with. So I do a lot of drumming with, architect pencils, those flat pencils. Using my computer desk, the printer, I've got a log, an actual log, wooden log down there for my bass drum. So it's not air guitar, but it's some form of drumming.
Nina, in 1981, there were tons of radio stations and DJs playing Start Me Up from the Rolling Stones. You mentioned a DJ's name to Mick Jagger. Chances are he won't know it. You say Nina Blackwood, he knows who you are. So the impact and a lasting impression that you have made on the music industry and the culture of what was the 80s is truly remarkable. And I hope you always know that. And we thank you for that, and thank you for joining us here today on Air Check.
Well, thank you, and I do have a little tiny story regarding Mick. His assistant that worked with him at the time, apparently my hair really bugged him. He did not like it. And if you look at the women that he's gone out with, they all have this slick hair and whatever. So his nickname, apparently, for me was Brush It. Mick Jagger did know who I was, but I don't know if he was a huge fan, but not of my hair, at least.
Well, I'd like to chime in and say, that the 80s were our time, Paul and I. I was 13 when MTV started, and when John Mellencamp said, hold on to 16 as long as you can, I got it, You, Mark, Martha, JJ, and Alan were a big part of what I will always remember growing up. And also, in fact, you also gave that added layer, at least to me, and my dream to be on the radio during those years. And it happened for me for the first time in 1987, and I've been going strong ever since. So thank you so much for everything and for sitting with us through this Air Check session today.
Well, thank you for asking me, and, good luck to both of you. Continued good luck.
Thank you, Nina.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye.
How cool was that?
How cool was she?
As cool as she ever was.
So down to earth. So nice to talk to.
She really is. Nina Blackwood on Air Check.
You can stream or download every episode of Air Check on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Make sure you subscribe and give us a great rating, too.
Still to come in Season 1 of Air Check, Danny Bonaducci and Sirius-XM's Eddie Trunk.
This is Rich DeSisto.
And I'm Paul Kelly.
We'll talk to you soon.
See ya.
Thanks for sitting in for this Air Check. Back at you with more tales from the tuner soon. Questions, comments, or to be on an upcoming episode, email aircheckme@gmail.com. Musical props to Chris Gordon. Announcer props. Yours truly, Greg O'Brien, the OB. Air Check is the creation of RDPK Productions.